Hey everybody, it's Robin from Ontario Iguanas. I have Molly with me today. She's getting really big. And she's going to help me today talking about lighting, heat, humidity, UV lights, all that kind of stuff. I find this is one of the most important things to talk about because I find it's one of the most misunderstood things when you're buying an iguana. A lot of people keep their iguanas with no UV light. They don't think they need it. As long as they're warm, that's all they really need. She's going to try to jump to the table. So a lot of iguanas I see even for sale on Kijiji and other sites like that, they have them posted, comes with everything they need, but they don't mention anything about a UV light. So I've emailed a couple people and they don't have UV lights on them. So that can cause a lot of different problems. One of the biggest problems is metabolic bone disease, which is sad, but it's really common with iguanas and other reptiles as well, other lizards. But it's something that can be completely avoided with a simple light. So I'm going to talk today about why they need the UV light, why is it so important, at what ages, and what are some other things you can help with metabolic bone disease. Okay, to start off, we're just going to talk about their temperatures that they need to be kept at, and their heat sources and different ways you can get heat to them. The biggest and the best way to get heat sources is the light bulbs, the heat bulbs for them. Depending on the size of your enclosure, what your enclosure is made out of, the vents in your enclosure and stuff like that, you need different sizes, so you need to kind of test that out and see what you need for your enclosure. I run probably about 150 watts in most of mine. So they need to be kept at between 90 and 97-ish for their basking areas, and the rest of their tank should go a little bit lower. That way they have a cooling area, but nothing should be below 80 in their enclosure. And then at nighttime, their temperatures can go as low as 75, but you don't want it any lower than that. Different ways that you can get this. Obviously the heat bulb is the most popular way and the easiest way to do so. A lot of people use heat rocks, which are a big no-no. You should never use heat rocks with iguanas. They're not a good source of heat because they just have to lay there in that one spot, as well as there's been so many cases of iguanas actually getting burns on their stomachs, their vent areas, their pads of their feet, everything like that. They don't have the same nervous system as we do. They don't have things to tell them, hey, that's really hot, I should move. So they ended up getting burnt. So you should never have a heat rock in with iguanas for that reason. As well as heat pads, but they tend not to get as hot. You can use them with padding between them so they're not laying right on them. But the best way I find is just with the heat bulbs. If you have your iguana out, say it's going to the vets just for a checkup or something, and you need to put it in a carrying case, but if it's a little chilly outside, you can do a couple different things. The vets, a lot of the time, I see they use warm water bottles, so you can use those. I have a thermal blanket, so I plug it in before I go to the vets and get it all warmed up. And then after, I just shove it in the crate, and my big lizard, Sassy, she absolutely loves it. She'll curl right up in it, so that's her favorite blanket. So if you are taking your iguana out, there's different ways to keep it warm. But in their enclosures, it's really important to have proper heat. The reason for that is they need that heat to digest properly. So if you have an enclosure that's a little too cold and the iguana is not at proper temperature, it may eat, it may not even eat, depending on how cold it is. But even if it eats, if the temperatures aren't warm enough, it cannot digest that food. So it's not getting any nutrients. That food's just sitting in their stomach. So it's never a good thing when their temperatures are too cold. So you always want to have a backup plan too, especially if you live in a colder climate. Say the weather goes out from a storm or something, you always want to have a backup plan to what you're going to do for them if the power goes out and their enclosures are going to be a little cold for a bit. So that's something to always be prepared for when you're owning any type of reptile, not just an iguana either. UV lighting I find is the most important thing to talk about with iguanas because it's one of the most missed lighting pieces that people don't put in their enclosures. The reason is, I think people just realize because they're reptiles, they're cold-blooded, they just need to be warm and that's it. The UV lighting provides them with a supplement for what natural sunlight would do to them in the wild. So if you live in a warmer climate where your iguana can go outside daily, you should always have a UV light. It doesn't need to be on all the time. But if your iguana is housed outside, then you won't need it, except for when it comes inside in the colder weather and stuff like that. So it's extremely important if you have UV lights for the colder climates. If your iguana is housed inside, you need UV lighting on it. The UV lighting supplements the sunlight that they naturally get. So what it does is it gives them vitamin D3. So vitamin D3 allows the body to absorb the calcium. Without that vitamin, you could put calcium supplement on their food, but they will not receive it. Their body won't absorb it. So you're actually wasting that calcium. So it's extremely important that they get it because, look at her. Because if you do not get your reptile a sufficient amount of calcium, come here, they will develop metabolic bone disease. So that causes the bones to weaken and disform. So sometimes you'll see the spine and it actually goes crooked all the way down. Their lower jaw will get pushed in. Their legs become really weak. Their toes maybe. Lots of different things can happen with metabolic bone disease, and it can kill an animal if it's left long enough and it gets that severe. So, and the problem with it is that all of the deformities that happen normally are not reversible. So if they have a pushed in lower jaw from MBD, that jaw will be like that for the rest of their life, no matter how good the care is that you give them later on. A really important side note with UV lighting is that it's common that people will buy UV lighting, which is awesome. You need that lighting, but they leave that light on for a year and a half, or until their heat light blows. The problem with that is that the UV rays stop being strong enough normally around 6 months when the bulb's around that old. So you can get computers that read the rays of UV lights. They're really expensive. I don't have one. If you do not have the money to purchase one, I recommend just change your bulbs every six months or so, which will allow your lizard, whether it's an iguana or another lizard, to maintain the UV rays that it's getting so they don't get too weak. The light will still produce, the bulb will still produce light, but will not produce strong enough rays for your lizard to use. Catch up so far as where we are. Heat, you want from 90 to 97-ish for their basking areas, and then the rest of their cage can be a little lower, but nothing below 80 for the daytime, and then you want nothing below 75, so 75 to 80 for their nighttime temperatures, so they can stay nice and warm throughout the night. No heat rocks, but other forms of heat are available for when your iguana is out of the enclosure and needs to be transported. UV lighting is mandatory for iguanas when they're inside. It's awesome. There's nothing that can really replace the sun completely, so if you can get your iguana out in natural sunlight, go for it, please do. Just be careful if you have to put a leash on them or a fenced backyard if it's a bigger iguana. and replace that bulb at least every 6 months to make sure those rays are strong enough for your lizard to be getting adequate UV rays. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today is humidity. So humidity is often, I feel, is overlooked as well when you're housing an iguana. They naturally come from an environment that is really humid, so you need to accommodate that in their enclosures if you're wanting to get an iguana or if you're housing one. So there's several different ways you can get humidity up in an enclosure. There's probably more ways than what I'm going to mention today. However, the biggest thing is if you have your iguana in a completely screened enclosure, it's going to be really hard to keep that humidity in as well as heat throughout the night. So I don't really recommend a screen enclosure for iguanas. All my enclosures are made of wood with plexiglass over the doors, so they keep in heat really well throughout the night. And I have vents in it for the day so the air can keep flowing. And also the humidity will stay in as well because the vents are a little higher up, so the humidity does stay in fairly well for them. So the different ways that you can keep humidity up, there are drippers that you can use. I don't use them. I've seen them, so I'm not sure how effective they are, but those exist. You can make one, you can buy one at the pet store. They seem pretty easy to make. You can get misters, humidifiers, fog machines. I have not a fog machine, I have a mister, and it works really well. You can change the setting on it to how much mist you want it coming out. It comes out almost like a foggy mist, so it's really neat, and the iguanas seem to really like it. As well as if you do not have any of those or options for those, there's bathing to keep your humidity up in your lizard, to keep it hydrated, as well as misting. So if you do not have a fogger or mister, you can mist your iguana and the enclosure daily or several times a day, depending on the enclosure and the size of it and everything. I just take a water bottle, you can buy them at the dollar store, fill it with water, and just spray them down a couple times a day. And you'll notice, you're gonna jump there, you'll notice when your iguana gets dehydrated, when it poops or when it goes to the bathroom, it'll have two things. It'll have the fecal matter, which is the brown poop, and then also have a liquid, which is the urids. The urids should be, I don't know if I'm saying that right, I think I am. It should be white. If it is a brown, if it is orange or like a pinkish color, that means your iguana is dehydrated. The darker the color, so if it's actually really dark orange, it means they're more dehydrated than if it was just like a pink or an off-white color. So that's something to always watch when your iguana goes to the bathroom, just to check to make sure they're hydrated enough. As well as their skin will get really loose. So if you look at Molly, her back legs are really firm. There's no really loose skin there or anything. She has a line down her side now. That's just because she's pulling her skin up. You can see if you make it bigger or whatever, but if your iguana is just naturally sitting there and it has a line, she's pulling it. But if their skin, if you can grab their leg skin, like kind of pinch it a little bit and it stays in that upright position the way you pinch it, that means your iguana is dehydrated as well. So just a couple mists. She was dehydrated a couple days ago. I missed her probably about 4 times in the day. I gave her a bath, and that was all in one day, and she's perfectly fine now. So those are just things to keep an eye on, is the humidity in your enclosures. One thing that I would like to mention, those small humidity gauges, they're about this big, they're little round ones that you get at the pet store. They work fairly well if you have low humidity. If you have an enclosure that has high humidity, what tends to happen is water actually gets inside the gauge, and then it actually takes the humidity of itself. So it actually doesn't take the humidity of the enclosure. So that's just something to watch. What I would recommend getting, you can get small ones that you would place inside your house, like on a window or something. You can get those and just stick them inside the cage. They're battery operated, they're more digital, so I would recommend those versus the small gauges that you get at the pet store. And you can buy those at a Home Hardware or a Home Depot or something like that for like 10 bucks. They're pretty cheap. So that's what I recommend for them. And just to keep an eye on the humidity, keep an eye when they go to the bathroom, just to make sure that they're nice and hydrated. And if any of you have tried getting your iguana to drink, or other lizards to drink out of a water bottle. It's really neat. I love watching them do it. So if you haven't tried that, that's something to look into. You should always have a clean water dish in their enclosure so they can lay right in it. So you don't want a tiny water dish, you want something that they can actually fit in. So if they feel like they're a little dry, they can jump in the water and just lay in it for a little bit, and then come back out to bath. So that gives them the opportunity to do it themselves, besides you waiting on you to give them a bath. So that's really all I'm going to talk about for this video. So I covered heat, UV, lighting, and humidity for a green iguana. This is Molly that I have with me. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see lots of pictures of her, Pip, and my other iguanas that I own as well. She's getting really big. But yeah, I think the next video I'm going to do will be a food video. So I'm going to try to get one up every Monday. I make my salads on Sunday, so I'll get lots of pictures of the salads that I'll make next week, and take some videos then. So I'll do a food video next week of what kind of diet that I make for them, the do's and don'ts, and I'll put supplements as well, so calcium supplements and other supplements that you can put in your salads. So I'll cover that next week, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's anything you feel that I missed, or you would like me to cover in another video, just comment below. You can message me on my Instagram page. If you just hashtag Ontario Iguanas, it will come up, or on Facebook at Ontario Iguanas. It was really nice seeing you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Hey everybody, it's Robin from Ontario Iguanas. I had Molly with me. Hey, hey.